Obviously you do, because.
We are live.
Good morning. We're back in Senate Judiciary to
And over here, we have
the amendment to S-193. Again, this was the amendment presented by multiple members of the Health and Welfare Committee and Institutions Committee. We have Senator Lyons here, and we have Senator Harrison, who just arrived, both of the respective chairs of those committees. And we are going to hear from Ledge Council in a little bit whenever they get off the floor, but wanted to provide an opportunity for the chairs to share their perspectives on the.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, actually, for our committee to take time with this. Obviously, we worked on this last session for a long time. The bill passed the Senate, but didn't pass the House. So what we have done here is to look at, within our jurisdiction, the clinical needs of the folks who are being committed to a forensic facility, to a secure facility, who have committed a crime with a life sentence and are found to be incompetent to stand trial. So keeping the overall sections about people who are within the bill. And we haven't changed your language. We began our amendment with section 4 on page 11 of the bill as you pass it out of the committee here. And then so within section 4 little b, we've taken out, if you look at that on line 8, we keep the forensic facility shall, and then we take out the rest of that sentence there. And then we add in our language that ensures that there is a therapeutic, recovery-oriented, and trauma-informed environment comparable to community-based residential treatment setting while maintaining appropriate levels of safety and security. We left in some language that was in the underlying bill. Overall, the goal is to ensure that when people are found not guilty by reason of insanity and are incompetent to stand trial, that we provide a place for them that is appropriate for their clinical needs. And we've been through this in our committee many times, and I know you've been through it many times. So I don't know how detailed you like us to be, but really, if you look at the amendment, I better look at the one that you're looking at. And you go to page, Senator Bruce has pointed out an important element that I think the Department of Mental Health should respond to, as well as others, and perhaps here Senator Harrison as well, on including the possibility. So provide the safe housing, and then it continues on by making sure that it could be segregated by sex or otherwise address clinical safety, operational considerations as appropriate, including the possible operation of multiple facilities if required by clinical needs transfer. First, that one is thank you for pointing that out. And so Department of Mental Health can weigh in, Department of Corrections can weigh in, but we felt that there may be a reason to do that.
If I can just interject real quick here, we did bring this up a bit earlier and had a conversation, brief conversation about it. One of the ways that at least I interpret it is, we created the less restrictive,
Least restrictive.
the least restrictive environment provisions for the two categories, and that could entail an individual being committed to a place that isn't a correctional facility. And so it would seem that if somebody is committed to a psychiatric hospital, they could also be receiving the competency restoration services there, even though they are still under the category of being somebody who is held without bail, charged with a life sentence. So that's my take on it, but
and I think that fits. I didn't introduce myself. I'm Senator Jenny Lyons. Anyway, but yeah, you're right, and I'm sure you'll be looking at that further. So what we're want to be sure is that clinical services are provided, and we know that the WellPath contract will need to be inclusive of the services that are, that's on page 2. And then also define staff qualifications, licensure, training, supervision requirements for appropriate care, clinically appropriate treatment, care, services. And then we did add in ensure that a registered licensed nurse or a physician are available to provide, should one of them or the other of those should be available 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. So should there be a need for someone in the middle of the night, there's a call available to have that care delivered. And then the other, number 7 on page 2, that as soon as the person is transferred to the facility, that within 72 hours that they have their reviewed and their clinical needs are evaluated at that point as they come into the facility, so they know what is needed for and then there are definitely your definitions of forensic facilities are included, and then we have a report back annually. So we have an annual report in here for January 15th. DOC, Dale and DMH, and Independent Living, Dale will provide a written report to our committees about the use of the forensic facility, who was placed in the previous calendar year, the types of clinical services and treatment provided during that time. This will be important for us. I know there are very few people we're talking about. We understand that, but it's important to understand how they're being taken care of. They do have specific needs. And then we have rulemaking around the forensic facility. And that does include the comments about, again, clinically appropriate standards, quality assurance, improvement, clinical oversight, documentation, and reporting, all the things that would be required, I think, should be required, and any other provisions necessary to ensure safe and effective and clinically appropriate implementation. And that's with DMH and DOC working together, and Dale Disabilities working together to provide those rules. And then the interim report coming in October to our committees from those folks about progress and the status and anticipated timeline for the adoption of rules. I mean, ordinarily, we think of rules taking about 18 months, so that we'll find out where they are with those. And then the forensic facility planning process. Now, we've asked for this before. I understand this is like the redundancy of redundant part, but we will ask for what is happening, the space considerations, design elements, and the institutions committee and our committee work together on some of this stuff. The design elements necessary to support the provision of therapeutic services and security of the proposed location, and the timing for any necessary fit up. So how long is it going to take? Where are we in that planning process? And initial staffing considerations and so on. And then the dates, and Katie can explain the date differential they have there. So that's our proposal of amendment to your bill. And I understand your question on the first page. So that sounds like it's going to be.
And if I might, again, to that last subsection off page 1, I'm wondering if we eliminated the last clause so that it read, provide for the safe housing and management of persons, including the ability separate the population by sex and to otherwise address clinical safety or operational considerations as appropriate.
period.
Sure. Well, semicolon, because we're.
Yes.
With that,
I'm fine with that, and I think my committee will be fine with it.
because, I mean, we can always,
Yes,
this is describing this one facility, but we could also anytime talk about that.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and DMH should weigh in on that as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Did you, with your recommendation, adding a semicolon and that's it?
There is a semicolon at the end of that sentence.
He's just saying
Okay.
ended at facilities with a semicolon, but cross out the last phrase.
No,
Again.
ended as appropriate. Ended at appropriate with the semicolon. And then striking out,
Oh, I get it. Well, multiple facilities are also included.
I'm hesitant on striking that, but let me,
well,
sorry.
and my problem is, this is, if you go up to line 9,
Mhm.
it's a description of this facility. And then in 3, one of the characteristics of this facility is somehow that it will suddenly involve multiple facilities.
As appropriate.
And, right, but based on the clinical needs of transferred persons, to me, that leaves open the ambiguity that now we're talking about 2 or 3 facilities.
So how does one facility operate multiple facilities is kind of the,
Right.
like the.
And why are we even talking about that?
Yeah.
Since this is to outline, describe, and bring online a facility.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Center Polsky,
Okay.
and then, yeah, Center Lyons.
I mean, I think I share the chair's concerns removing that. I feel like if the clinical needs are there, we should be obligated to do what is clinically necessary.
Right, but
It's
this
the,
is gonna be a very expensive proposition. If we're then saying dependent on needs, now it's double in cost. It's, I would like to be clear on what we're greenlighting. And this just seems to open it up, because we've talked from the beginning about a facility, I mean, for years. And now in one clause, we're introducing multiple facilities, and it's in a shall statement. So I don't know, seems unnecessarily ambiguous.
So I would go along with the clinical needs piece, taking that last phrase out, beginning with if, but including the possible operation of multiple facilities. Reason I would
Yeah.
consider that, and that you'll have to talk with Karen Barber and others, but we're talking about a cohort of different types of people here. We're talking about substance use disorder, we're talking about IDD and developmental disability, we're talking about mental health, and we're talking about traumatic brain injury. So each of those cohorts has a different clinical need, and so we can take out the clinical need, but they each have different, each different. And so it might be that folks with substance use disorder who committed a crime with a life sentence can be restored to competency faster in a different way from those with mental health issues or IDD. And in that sense, you might find that they can go to a different facility from the other folks. And so I'll leave it, that's the way I look at this right here. But I think I'm gonna phone a friend, and when you have Katie McClint,
Okay,
and I think that.
and what you just suggested, I could go along with. So in other words, ending the line at including the possible operation of multiple facilities,
I could do that.
because it's not then modified by it's being required by the condition of the person.
I was just going to mention another possibility,
Uh-oh.
a grammatical change that I think might get to the ambiguity here, which is instead of including the possible operation of multiple facilities, so on, we say including the coordination between multiple facilities, so that if you're having somebody who's committed to Southern State and based on the process and all the circumstances, it now makes more sense for them to be committed to the Berlin Psychiatric Hospital or a different facility somewhere else. That's a possibility.
I mean, I hate to harp on this, but the language is strange because it's saying this new forensic facility shall be involved in the operation of multiple facilities. The forensic facility, the new one, isn't gonna operate other facilities. We're talking about the Department of Health might operate. So I don't know, it's in a list of things characterizing this facility, and then suddenly it's saying one of the characteristics of this facility is that it will operate other facilities.
Yeah, I get your point.
Yeah.
That's why I'm thinking it's a coordination
Yeah.
between multiple facilities, but also the DMA, DOC, or Senator Harrison. Does anybody else have a bit more?
I'll just say, I'm just happy striking that last phrase, and then you guys can wordsmith, you know, how you want to express it based on what you hear from us.
Yes,
And
yeah.
so, yeah, but do you have any other questions for me? Because I'm we pressed for time.
No problem. No other, I think maybe the rest of our questions should be for Eric and other folks. So if you're pressed for time, I know you got a committee.
Yeah, no, I mean, so I, just to let you know, our committee worked very hard on this. We, you know, based on experiences that we had with our legislation last year, and also with, I've been working with the Judiciary on this, and as you know, with the reducing the competency backlog that we've had, we worked on that. We still have this issue with people who have not yet been adjudicated, who are incompetent to stand trial, and it is a real tough nut to crack. So I appreciate the work that you've done on the bill.
Thank you. And likewise for the amendment. Okay, please.
Okay, I'm getting out of this seat. But my question for you is this, I mean, rather than have an amendment on top of an amendment, if you find that there are some little changes that everyone is agreeable to, I'm happy to do that, and Katie can do that on our behalf. And if you want to sign on to the proposed amendment, that would be great. So just let me know.
Okay, thank you. Senator Harrison, did you want to
Yes,
testify? on this?
yes,
Did you want to testify on the whole thing, or did you want to just respond to that one piece?
it doesn't matter to me what order you go in.
Okay, so DMH, did you want to respond to that one little piece, and then we can have Senator Harrison testify to the whole thing?
Right, but I also do want to respond to that one little piece.
Okay, well, let's do DMH first, and then
Yeah,
Senator
that's
Harrison
fine.
for the whole thing.
I think from our perspective, we would support the proposed change. I think the idea and what AHS had asked for was maximum flexibility to allow the Department of Corrections in collaboration with the Agency of Human Services to really have the opportunity itself to determine what made the most sense. We're talking about a very small population. And so having a lot of specific guardrails around that makes it difficult for DOC to kind of really actually look at its facilities, look at the people, and determine what is most politically appropriate. And so the idea is to allow us that flexibility. I will say that I think this came out of a concern that gets raised quite often, which is, can we mix populations? And what I would say to that, and what I've said before, is that we can and we do mix populations all the time. People are receiving treatment mixed together for lots of different things. And so in our world, there's not this kind of need to separate someone who's got a substance use disorder necessarily from someone who's getting treated, because most of the time there's co-occurring disorders. And so it makes sense to do it together. So, I think the language, as you've suggested, makes sense. And I think the idea really is just to make sure we're able to make decisions that are clinically appropriate to give us the flexibility to do so.
The language proposed of striking it or saying coordinate all the facilities.
I think the operation, right? You want to keep the operation.
Affirmative. So striking from the phrase, beginning with the word on page 1 of draft number 4.1, on page 1, line 19, striking from if through the end of line 20. So the phrase is striking the phrase if required by the clinical needs of transferred persons. Okay.
And that would be fine with me.
And it would yes, ma'am. It would end with a semicolon at after the phrase multiple facilities. Multiple facilities, semicolon leading to 4.
And then including the possible operation of multiple facilities and a semicolon.
Yeah.
Before the semicolon, yes. And again, we already operate multiple facilities.
Your point, Senator Steen, I think they're finishing. if someone was going to BPCH, they would fall under this anyway, so there's not necessarily a need to coordinate in that way that maybe you were envisioning, because they would be eligible for this facility if they needed to go to DMH, they would simply be in DMH custody. Does that address your concern?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah. Okay. Senator Harrison.
Thinkers, how about I start with that?
Yeah, that would be good.
Okay, because I think it's relatively, there's another way to look at it with, I'm sorry, Wendy Harrison, I represent the Wyndham District and Chair of Institutions. And thank you very much for working with us on this amendment, and we do work with health and welfare. And I have comments on things that are specifically relative to institutions. So corrections is one of possibly, it may be the only institution in the state that does distinguish between men and women. There is actually a gender bill coming to us from the House where we'll discuss this more, but the facilities are segregated by sex. And we actually talked about the word sex versus gender, and we decided not to change it yesterday because we didn't want to have too many changes to this. But right now, we do have, if you're, what we've heard is that folks who are in these categories, in this category of a forensic facility, are already in the prisons. They are in the women's prison as well as in the men's prison. So there are two facilities already being used for that purpose. I think when you started this, and I wasn't part of it, but you were looking at a forensic facility not in a prison. And that kind of facility, if it was run by DMH or similar, that could have men and women and other sorts of different populations. So I think that's where the disconnect came from, is that this, the section 3, paragraph 3, has to do with the prison. So I agree that having the period after multiple facilities on line 19, that makes sense.
Okay.
Having a period there.
Correct.
After multiple-
Or a semicolon, sorry, yeah.
And still striking if required by clinical needs.
Yes, because it could be required for multiple reasons. I mean, it actually makes it more flexible if we take that out.
And do you prefer keeping the language of possible operation of multiple facilities rather than the possible coordination between multiple facilities, if that matter?
It doesn't matter to me, as long as
Wait, that's-
you all know. We collaborated well with two departments. Do you want me to continue or do you want to?
Yeah, no, I know you want to,
Well,
yes.
okay.
Yes.
So, so I'll highlight the paragraphs that, my committee was particularly interested in. On page 2, it's, number 6, ensure that a registered nurse, or a physician is available. And that's just for safety of the units, because right now, we're over capacity in the prisons and understaffed. So there is, they are very delicate operations, and our concern is that they not be, that they be able to operate well, and that this facility doesn't cause a disturbance. And one way to do that is to make sure that the medical folks are in. And then on page 3, in front of the rulemaking, line 19, standards for quality assurance and improvement, clinical oversight, safety and risk management protocols, and more specifically important, and mechanisms for monitoring compliance. And we did discuss in institutions, I think it was yesterday, that rulemaking doesn't have to take 18 months. It could progress at a quicker schedule. And then on page 4, first paragraph, it says any other provisions necessary. So specifically requiring provision of a forensic facility service in a unit that is separate from other correctional populations. Right now, the amount of folks is minimal, as you discussed. We don't know what the complete population is going to be. The prison weren't designed for this, so it's good to have this flexibility in the rulemaking. And the interim report, also on that page, line 17, the planning, including specific proposed location, space consideration, design elements, that's really important. And then on page 5, lines 1 through 4, initial staffing considerations, anticipated staffing levels. That's really something that we need to know about because again, we're understaffed now. And then timelines to make sense. So.
Thanks.
That's all right. Recommendation.
I'm wondering if you can help me understand why you said your committee had conversation about sex versus gender, and I'm a little concerned actually that we're suggesting separation by sex and not gender, because to me that indicates that someone who is
Yes.
a transgender woman or a transgender man could be placed in the wrong facility.
That's the suggestion to change actually came from the director of communications, corrections, excuse me. So that's, we would be fine with that change.
Okay.
And at that point in our conversation, we were looking at not having more changes to this. We wanted to finish this up, but our committee is fine to change sex to gender.
Okay.
We would support that.
If I may, the reason I raised the issue is that this would make this very small population different from of every other population in our custody. We do not separate anyone merely by sex or gender is a component of the decision-making process. It is true that the vast majority of all but 13 people in our custody right now, I believe, are separated by sex. But that is not the sole component. It's the totality of circumstance in each individual case. And I cannot speak whether or not any of the individuals who are currently in our custody who fit the parameters of this proposed language and statute are among those 13. I don't know for sure.
So just so I understand, if we were to say sex and gender, it wouldn't have an impact then on how you already do this?
Affirmative.
Okay.
If you were to state sex or gender, sex and gender, whichever you prefer.
And our committee is fine with that. Supportive of that.
Any other questions? Or did I see a hand from DMH?
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, so I have a feeling Eric is detained on the board right now, and I don't want to take a straw poll with 4 out of 5 members and without having heard from ledge council. So we will wait on this. We'll make the recommendations to, I guess, Senator Lyons and to relay the recommendations to Katie regarding sex or gender, and then striking the second half of lines 19 through 20, where it starts with if required by the clinical needs and so on. And then is there anything else? Any last testimony from DMA for DOC on this? Okay. All right, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. All right. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Okay, so we will wrap this up presumably next week.